Hello, beautiful people, and welcome to the Black Psychologist podcast presented by the Black Psychologist Network, the Let's Get Some Perspective edition, where we react and analyze viral vids making their way across the social media and the internet. I am one half of your humble and gracious host, Dr. Kyle Osborne. He is I, and I am him. And of course, you all know I'm not flying this aircraft by myself. I'm joined by the one and only, the best there is, the best there was, and the best there ever will be. My friend, my brother, my colleague, my brethren, Dr. Jason Coleman. What's going on, good brother?
What's going on, bro, man? Just chilling. We got good weather out here in Jersey on this Sunday, man. So, happy Easter to everybody out there. If you celebrate, if not, then, just hopefully you had a good weekend anyway. But I'm chilling, man. Good. What's up with you?
Absolutely, man. I'm gonna take this beautiful weather also. It's been cold and windy and rainy and all kinds of stuff for the majority of the week. So I'm gonna take this. I had an extended weekend. They gave us a day off for the holiday, so I'm gonna take that any day of the week, bro.
Oh, you was off Friday, huh?
Yeah, man. Yeah. We
Yeah,
need that
man.
self-care.
Listen, man. Everybody gotta kind of take a time and just when you can and just enjoy that. We was talking about that before we got on, right? So, and the weather's breaking and all that. So, feeling good, man. Just looking forward to it.
Absolutely. Listen, let's get right into it. Speaking of feeling good, the Freaknik documentary, we had to get into it. A lot of people have been asking us to discuss it, get our take on it. Let's since we talk about feeling good, let's do it. All right, now when the Freaknik documentary first was announced by Hulu, and that's where, for those of you that haven't seen it, absolutely go check it out. It's a great documentary. When they first announced plans to release this documentary last year, a lot of people were shook, Jay. I mean, like a lot of people were concerned. People were freaking out
about the footage.
Of the footage. A lot of people were concerned and scared that the footage that was going to be released or that was going to be broadcasted would might have some embarrassing footage. It might impact some individuals and their professional career, and some public figures thought it would end their career. It was a lot of panic going on out there. In fact, I want to say there was a judge and a politician that actually sued the executive producers to try to get it to keep it from coming out.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So it was a lot of people that were concerned, which, raises the issue. That means, what were you doing on those tapes, right? That kind of...
Listen, there was a lot of questionable behavior going on those tapes. Like, listen, Back then, remember, there was Polaroids. I was a young kid, but I remember my brother coming back, developing those pictures, and the ones he could show me, some of them was very, very questionable. And those people, if you think about the time frame, they would be your judges and your CEOs and your aunts and uncles and all these other people right now. So,
You had the Polaroids, you had the video cams, you had the high 8s and the 8mm and all those other different camcorders, little hand. Remember those?
Yeah, bro, all of that. Yeah. That was their time.
Yeah. So, but honestly, after watching the documentary, and while I understand, the concern about the footage and some of the people being in less favorable circumstances and situations out there, it really wasn't that bad, honestly. Like it was an overreaction if you watch the documentary. Like it really showed people having fun. It was a party time that spilled out into like all the different streets of Atlanta. And like it also showed a lot of like cultural significant things that were going on as well. Like it wasn't always just all the partying and all kinds of different things. Like there was a lot of cultural significant activities and events that were taking place. And so what I enjoyed the most was that it was really educational in the sense of that they showed like the actual beginning of the Freaknik, right? Like they really told the story of how it started, back in like 1983, 1984, and that it started out in DC with kids from HBCUs, Howard, and a couple other different schools that were like stuck on spring break, right? Like Jay, you remember being in during spring break, and your typical HBCU college kid, you don't have any money, right? So it's a situation where if you can't get back home, depending on where you're from, like you're stuck on campus, like you have nothing to do. And that's what it was. It was a situation where you had a group of college kids that weren't able to go back home for spring break, and so they decided to, hey, let's have a cookout, let's have a picnic. And they got together with some friends and other different college kids, and they set up shop, went down to Atlanta, had a picnic, had food, people came out, sororities, fraternities, whatever the case may be. And that's how it started out, right? And it started out, and they gave like how the original name came from. Like the original name is not based off anything like, debauchery related. It's based off the song La Freak, that song, that disco hit that was really big during the time.
Right.
So like that's what I enjoyed the most, like at first glance when it first came on, that they gave the history of it, of how it came out.
I mean, it's funny too, right? And again, you can learn a lot, right? Because I didn't know it was as old as it was like starting like in the 80s or whatever. And then I didn't know it was as big as it got to in terms of the numbers. Like they're talking about approaching like 250,000 people at one time, right? And it's funny because again, you look at all of these different theories and this and that, but the police and the elected officials at some point, they get together and they're like, yo, this is, we don't want this festival, kind of in our city anymore, right? The interesting thing I think about this, right, kind of looking back on it, is I look at it from a perspective of like, we're in 2024, right? And I look at other, like the Lil Wayne has that Louisiana Fest, right? Jay-Z has the Made in America. He partnered with Budweiser, right? In a different kind of vein, Timbaland and Swiss Beats, I think, had the verses for a while, right? Or whoever, don't kill me if I get it wrong. But my point is, I'm wondering what ownership of that like name and the festival would have done, right? Like by the right people in terms of what that kind of party, what that culture, what it could have been now, right? Because it was legendary in terms of how people in the culture talk about it, kind of like Woodstock. You know what I mean? Like it's a legendary kind of idea to the point where you can still sell T-shirts with Freaknik 90s or 90 whatever on it, and people will buy it, and they have nostalgia and memories associated with it and all of that. So I just can't help but when I see those type of documentaries and the clips and people reminiscing about like what an idea like that could have been, developed into if it was in the right hands. You know what I mean? But it's interesting.
If you look at it, that is like a lot of these festivals in its infancy, right? Like that is kind of like the framework of the festivals, because that's what I was referring to when you were talking about like the cultural significant impact. You had situations where like during that period of time, like when Luke and other different music artists got into the scene, like that was how music was advertised back then, right? Like they talk about a documentary, like Jermaine Dupri had all his artists performing at the different Freakniks, right? You had like Chris Cross, you had the Brat, you had Escape, you had Outkast, you had Goody Bop, you had like all of those, you know what I mean, early 90s artists just getting off the ground, and this was their opportunity to showcase. And so you had people coming from all these other different areas, from Jersey, from Idaho, from everywhere, right? Just coming down just for the Freaknik. And so when they, in addition, of course, to, the women, the food, all the other different things that were going on, you had an opportunity to see like new music that was up and coming, right? You had a situation where people were enterprising. You had people selling shirts. You had vendors. You had all different types of things that were going on. So it went from the kids that were like, oh, I can't go home, to I don't want to go home. Right? Like, I'm staying down here. This is where it's at. You got kids like, in the word of mouth spread. Because remember, this is before social media. This is before You just had the telephone. You had people word of mouth.
Listen,
Like
I
they
knew
went.
about I knew
Yo,
about this. I knew about this when I first heard about it. I was in 8th grade. I was in 90. This was like 94. You
yeah.
know what I'm saying? So 94, 95. I was in 8th grade. You know, because my brother was going because my man Thad is from Atlanta. So it was like there was no other place to go. You going to Freaknik or during spring break. So even at that time, I knew I was going to Howard, and in my mind, I was like, that's what you one of the things you look forward to. Same way I look forward to Howard homecoming. I thought, when I got to that period, that was what was going to be what everybody was doing, Freaknik. It was that legendary. So it's just crazy, how things morph and change. Because I don't know what is the modern day, equivalent to that. Is it like a Coachella or something like that? Is it made in America? Is it? I'm not culturally significant in terms of us, but I mean, like, is it made in America as close as it comes? I mean, I don't
I
know.
don't. I don't know, because here's the thing. I think also what made the Freaknik special was that you heard, right, word of mouth, or there were, like you said, some Polaroids, or there was things like now everything is captured on social media now, right?
Yeah,
Like and I know that, like, oh, if you didn't go, you don't officially go someplace unless you post about it, unfortunately.
right.
And so that's not what the Freaknik was. Of course, like, you had the camcorders, people taking pictures and things, but you didn't see the footage. Like, they didn't get aired out. Like, you don't see that footage on YouTube and all. It was like, yo, you were there, you experienced it, and then after that, like, you got to look at it. Like how they said they got the footage is that they like were requesting people send stuff in. So you had a lot of these tapes
Yeah,
that were probably like in basements and attics collecting dust,
they
because it's like
sending in. They got to go dig up VHS
exactly
tapes first.
from there, the converters and
Yeah,
everything. So that's the
right.
difference, where whatever was taking place down there, like, you had to be there to really experience it. Now it's different. So I don't know if there really could kind of be that, because it's like everything is social media. Like, so you have one thing where it was like only memories and like select some footage, to now you're at everybody's pulling out their phones, whatever's happening.
Right. I mean,
You know,
listen, the
I think
the
that's what made
phone
it kind of
effect, we know through experimentation and everything else, and just through life, that everything changes when you're under the microscope. If you're being recorded, like, your behavior changes. So the fact that we are in a time period where everybody has a phone, and especially at an event like that, we know that everybody's gonna have our phones. It would probably most likely affect people's ability to let their guard down. So
yeah.
Freaknik 2025 wouldn't be the same anyway, unless you had a stipulation which you couldn't do, right? Like, yo, take everybody's phones. Yeah, then it's a whole nother type of event, So it's not physically possible. So,
That's right. So like back then, because they didn't have that part, you have folks that was able to leave whatever school that they're at, come down to Freaknik, and you can, I'm not gonna say wild out, but you were able to be your uninhibited self, because
right,
it was like you were free to do that, right? So if you want to use words like you were liberated and all these other different types of expression, that was cool, because you right, you were able to do that. You can't do that now. You got the phones. Everybody's recording something that's going to get posted. People are going, like, you don't have that ability to kind of be your more kind of free self, for a lack of a better term. So that's why I don't know things that took place back then. I don't know if they're ever going to really be equivalent to events that you could put on now, because, like you said, it's so difficult to kind of capture that, and for things to be a little bit more private, and things of that nature. Um, so yeah, nah, it was definitely, I like the way they talked about it the way they talked about just the evolution of it. Of course, they also had to talk about just the negative aspect of it, and I think this is also unfortunately happens to a lot of events that are important to us culturally, that we kind of develop and put on for ourselves. That the negative aspect comes into play, right? Like, you have some of the individuals where, as it went into like the later '90s, you had individuals that were just coming down there that were involved with Freaknik, or like the festivities, that were not, like, they didn't have good intentions, right? So
right.
unfortunately,
Yeah, you're always
women,
gonna have that.
yeah, you had women that were getting assaulted, you had people, you had fights and different things that were
Yeah.
breaking out. So unfortunately, that led to like the demise, and also like what kind of the way Atlanta was evolving, especially like with the Olympics that were coming in. Unfortunately, when you have incidents like that and things start to kind of get out of hand, you have to do away with stuff. So I'm happy that they highlighted that aspect of it. But for the most part, you didn't have issues, right? Like you didn't have people coming down to celebrate, hang out, eat, and celebrate without all the ruckus. But unfortunately, you know how things go. You know, when unlike mind people get into it and they want to start causing chaos. So, but it was cool because if you look at it, this is kind of like our version of what it was. I mean, maybe kind of Girls Gone Wild, because most white people used to go down to Daytona, right? They used to go to Daytona, go down to Florida. We weren't necessarily welcome there. So this was our equivalent, right? This is our spring break. This is where
I think that's a good
you know what I mean?
Yeah, that's a good equivalent. Yeah, that's a good equivalent right there.
So shout out to those that did it. I know it was Jermaine Dupri, and I think Uncle Luke and some other folks that were involved in the Freaknik documentary. If you hadn't had an opportunity to check it out, I absolutely encourage you to watch it. I mean, again, they weren't really blurring out faces, so you might see somebody you know over there, but that's fine though. That is okay, right? It wasn't like they were showing them on top of cars doing ungodly things or anything of that nature. Like it's cool. And I think just kind of personally speaking, like it allows you to kind of look at yourself like back then when you were young, right? I don't think people should be ashamed of it. I think it's something to embrace. Be like, hey, listen, you know, like you were young, man. You hung out, you had fun. It was a good event. You were part of something important. That's the way I think.
Yeah, man. As long as woman or man, as long as you're not caught in no compromising position, and they'll probably agree with you. You know, but if you caught in a compromising spot, like you somebody's uncle or auntie, you know, it's not what you want. Let's just say that, you know.
You got to put in the thing like, no, that was auntie before she got saved. That was auntie before she was born again, before she found religion.
Oh
man, you got to put that in there. But yeah, it's definitely a good joint. I encourage anybody to go check that out. All right, on to another documentary that a lot of people were asking us to speak on. All right, the Wendy Williams documentary, the Where is Wendy Williams? All right, so last month, A&E Networks, the parent company of the Lifetime channel, aired an in-depth documentary about radio and media personality Wendy Williams, entitled "Where is Wendy Williams?" So in 2021 and 2022, just to kind of give a backstory, Wendy ended her 14-year nationally syndicated talk show after she began struggling with medical issues. In 2023, she was diagnosed with frontotemporal lobe dementia and progressive aphasia. So for those of you that aren't familiar with what aphasia is a language and communication disorder caused by damage in a specific area of the brain that controls the language, expression, and comprehension. So essentially, if someone has this condition, it can leave you or leave that person unable to communicate effectively with others. So it's typically caused by a stroke, head injury, brain tumor infection, dementia. But typically in this demographic, people with aphasia are like in that middle age to older age. And there are many different types of aphasia. So it depends on which area of the brain where the brain is infected is. So you can have Broca's aphasia, Wernicke's aphasia, global transcortical aphasia, different types, right? So getting back to Wendy, around the time that her show ended, it was reported that her son KJ had large sums of money taken from her account, and that he had spent like over $100,000 on Uber Eats and other food delivery apps, and he was using Wendy's money. So subsequently, Wells Fargo froze her accounts, fearing that she possibly being financially exploited. So that action led to the appointment of a financial guardian. And so, it goes on to kind of how the people around her are like supposed to be taking care of her and so on and so forth for the next few episodes. So for me, the moment that I see Wendy and then I see the individuals that are around her, for me, Jay, like it was very clear that the individuals that are responsible for her care and her well-being are very much beyond their scope of practice and their ability. I think it's like her manager, the DJ that used to be like on her talk show, her publicist, and maybe some other one of her other family friends. They're responsible for her care. They're the ones providing like all the like I guess her responsibilities or like the testimonials and other different things. But they are so out of their depth in regards to taking care of her. Like for example, you had some of them that were like hiding her liquor from her. You had some individuals giving her liquor. You had just or giving her alcohol just to pacify her. You had they were wheeling her to like various destinations throughout the documentary, to like public events that only really prompted episodes of agitation or episodes of confusion and combativeness from her. It just unfortunately, one of the biggest glaring issues that I took away immediately is that the individuals that are like supposed to be taking care of her,
Mm-hmm.
they're not equipped for that. Like
Right.
they don't know how to support an individual that is experiencing this particular type of medical condition. And that was really disheartening for me watching that. For the reason that if you don't have people that are trained, people that are equipped to support someone that is experiencing these medical conditions, then unfortunately, like their quality of life, their prognosis, whatever their recovery, um, it's just gonna continue to decrease.
Well,
And it's beneficial for the patient or for the person.
the thing about this is, it's so debilitating, right? Like when you do start to get those symptoms that are going to impact your life and your functioning, first of all, we know that there's no cure, right? And then it's family support and all of that services, all of that is becomes so important, right? And we don't know either one of these people, but it appears, we know Bruce Willis was diagnosed with a similar condition, right? So we know had a similar diagnosis. So it appears like he has a little bit more or a lot more support, in terms of what you see publicly, but there still were questions about him working the last couple of years and working too much, right? So remember, these aren't necessarily people that can't, they're going to have problems, right? Speaking, reading, understanding, comprehending, all of that. But this is not going to necessarily be the case all the time, right? So it might be difficult during the times when, they are lucid and clear to prevent them from working and going to appearances and doing certain things. So I can understand it's a difficult situation if you're a caregiver, especially if you're a person who's been on the person's payroll for years, right? Because you probably feel like you have an obligation now. It might be a little unfair what I said earlier, right? Because Bruce Willis' family, his family members might have a little bit more leverage, right? From what you're saying, what we know about Wendy Williams' family, we know, her relationship kind of ended, and there's suspicion from what you said that her son was misusing her funds, right? So it's not unfair to assume that she might not have the same amount of support, right? Again, this is unfortunately, a horrible situation because it's just going to get worse more than most likely, right?
Yeah.
And I think when you see people react, it's just, I don't know. It's maybe it's I don't want to say it's difficult, but you see like a bunch of different reactions from a bunch of different people, kind of because of the character that Wendy Williams kind of played over her career, right? Obviously, we're not talking about that because we're talking about medical care and her condition, but I think that's one of the reasons why you see like a large amount of different reactions from people or no reaction from people, right? Whereas opposed to when this happened with Bruce Willis, it seemed like across the board there was a lot more. I want to say empathy in general,
Yeah.
It just kind of seemed like that, but
It's unfortunate that individuals, especially after watching this, I find it, we're not in the business of judging individuals. At the same time, if you can't develop a sense of just some form of sympathy, empathy, some type of just for the looking at Wendy and what she's experiencing from a humanistic approach or perspective. I mean, I don't know. I think that might raise red flags with the viewer, right? Because you see how and what she's struggling with.
I agree with you, but I'm just saying, like, for a lot of people, the tendency is to kick somebody when they're down. You know, that's the tendency, right? So, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's one thing again. Wendy wasn't. I mean, of course, we know how intrusive she was, given her line of work and what she did, and it did impact people's families. I guess there's you can find a whole line of celebrities that had issues with what she did and how it impacted, and with the gossip and so on and so forth. But when you look at what she's experiencing, especially with this debilitating condition, and what she's experiencing, I mean, this for individuals that have ever had someone that's had a similar condition, like it's very not only is it difficult on the individual themselves that's going through this degenerative condition or disease, but it's also the family members or someone who's in a position to take care of them. Like it is a very, very stressful, debilitating thing. And this is, if anything, this is what I have always encouraged clients or patients or the family members of clients, because I've had the opportunity of having some patients that had aphasia or had dementia. It's making sure that you, if you're able to, is have this family member in a situation, in, like say in a facility or nursing care or whatever the care may be, where they can be around people that are going to be taken care of. One of the most primary and most prevalent mistakes that family members do is they try to take on the family member themselves. Right. And if you're not a trained provider or clinician or care, like you are going to burn yourself out taking care of an individual with this particular type of condition or conditions that are like neurocognitive based and degenerative, because it's only going in one direction and it affects so many different aspects of them, right? Their emotional aspects of the change of mental status, the behavior component, all these other different things. And it's a situation where I'm sure it struck a chord with a lot of individuals that have had this experience with family members. At the same time, I'm going to tease out what you said, like just the mere fact of how people in this position can be taken advantage of by family, by friends, or whoever is around them. Because that was some of the things I saw in the comments or on social media, is that why guardianship wasn't granted to the family. And the reason being, to my understanding, is that there's a lot of disagreements and fighting within the family about care, about money, about all these other different things. So anytime there's any type of intra-group conflict, a third party is going to step in and they're going to make decisions for the person. They're going to choose whoever's going to be, watching this person responsible. And that's tough because I know a lot of families go through that. But if the situation isn't secure within the family, that's where a third party steps in. And this is why you had this documentary being granted or being viewed in the first place. Honestly, I don't think it ever should have aired. But
that was a large portion of the reaction too, right? Like, was it even appropriate, right?
Listen, they got
because it came out before her diagnosis was released, right?
Yeah, like listen, it scored strong ratings with 1.2 million viewers on the first day. And then, of course, you have people going back and watching it. So, unfortunately, whoever, they're thinking like the same thing with Bruce Willis, money, right? Bottom line, money. Like, we know that this is a terrible situation, but we're still going to air it because we know people are going to tune in.
Right. I mean, people it's like clickbait, unfortunately. Like, people are going to watch it whether it's good or bad, So, there's really no
people around her, like, the people, it's unfortunate because the folks that were around her, right, I guess, were supposed to be taking care of her. Like, you saw them, it just seemed like it was more of an opportunity. They're trying to stay close to her, like for different shots on the camera, other different things. Like, it seemed like they were like just so well dressed, like in the house. Like, if you're typically taking care of somebody, like you're not coming in fresh to death, like with the
You're saying they was dressing like it was a reality show, huh?
Bro, listen, they was coming in with the Louis on, my man had the chain on and everything. Like, if you're taking care of somebody, this is not the situation, right? Like that's not the appropriate attire that we're using.
Yo, that's shout out. That's crazy.
Listen, like they had the Chanel, the Gucci, everything on. Like, as they're watching her, I'm like, what are we doing here? Like, it was wild, bro.
People opportunists, man.
Yeah, man, and that's really what it comes down to. So, yeah, it's a situation where you hope that Wendy gets the care that she needs from the appropriate, clinicians and individuals, and she gets the right care, because this is a really, really difficult condition for her and for family members or people that are around her. So, but yeah, it was a tough watch. Hopefully, again, it's a situation where you hope families get the message where you got to start putting things in order, because this health thing is real. And
yeah, man, I agree, bro.
Yeah, this can impact anybody. So absolutely, make sure you have your things in order. You start having those tough conversations about advanced directives and insurance and wills and all these other different tough conversations that people tend not to have until it's too late. And then you have these type of guardianship situations that get placed in conservatorships, and it gets nasty, man. It gets real nasty.
But wish her the best, man. Hopefully she get the right people, right support around her,
Absolutely. Anything else before we get out of here, Jay?
Nope. Of course, we just want to thank everybody that's riding with us. We're gonna keep the content coming, and appreciate you, my brother, for steering the ship.
Yes. Run out and tell a friend. All right. Absolutely. We appreciate the feedback and the comments that people are jumping in, and we appreciate the engagement. We're going to keep things rolling. You guys keep subscribing, keep telling a friend, keep hitting that like button, and we're going to keep pushing out that edutainment. All right. Jay, until we meet again, my friend.
All right, bro. Later.
All right.